Hey, welcome everybody. Excited to have you join this breakout. Got folks coming into this breakout. You are in Zoom to VR, creating culture in a remote world. So excited to have you joining us. And we'll give it maybe another moment just so we can let everybody in. All right. Well, hey, everybody. My name is Autumn Hanline, and I work with faith-driven entrepreneur. And so I'm excited to get to host this breakout and to do so alongside Brian Rowland and Renji Bajoy. And so want to give you a bit of an introduction to, first of all, what you've stepped into. So this is the Zoom to VR breakout, creating culture in a remote world. So obviously, you know, many of you have gathered here in your groups today, and we are watching the conference remotely. Many of you are working remotely. And so want to just have a discussion around what that means for you as entrepreneurs, as business leaders, where we are in the industry, and where we're going. So let me just give you a bit of an introduction to our two panelists today. To Brian, first of all, Brian Rowland. He's the founder of Abinity, and it's a 6-time Inc. 5000 company. Powers corporate perks for top brands, including, you might have heard of them, US Bank, MasterCard. And while they provide millions of subscribers with private discounts, the company's social mission is fighting extreme poverty with every program they deliver. Abinity recently exceeded $1 million of total giving and hired a CEO. So Brian put himself out of business to accelerate their growth with their fully remote team. And Brian lives in Scottsdale with his wife and 3 daughters and is investing his time and efforts that help like-minded entrepreneurs like yourselves establish a giving plan of their own. So we're excited to hear from Brian. And then also let me introduce our second panelist, Renji. Renji Bajoy is the founder of Immerse. So a Techstars startup. He's partnered with Facebook, HTC, Microsoft, Samsung to build virtual reality offices. He's raised $12 million to date and was a part of Forbes 2021 30 Under 30. Graduated with his master's from Georgia Tech in computer vision and machine learning, and was a Techstars portfolio founder. So we are really excited to have the two of them here. I'm going to bring them up with us. I should have done that at the start, but here's our two panelists. And really, I'm going to start with you, Brian. You know, many of us have experienced remote work in the past year for the first time, but you've led a fully remote company for more than, I think, a decade. So can you share why you think having a social mission outside of your product or service is key to cultivating a healthy remote team?
Yeah, so thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be with everybody. And I've really enjoyed being a part of the conference this morning and listening in. As I hired a CEO to run the business a year and a half ago, I really had a lot of time to debrief on, you know, how do we get here? How do we get to this point? We hit some major milestones in the last year, 6 times on the Inc. 5000 list, the ability for the founder to step aside and hire leadership to take it into the next growth phase. And our social mission that we started in 2006 just crossed over $1 million of direct giving towards extreme poverty through our partner World Vision. And it's just been an amazing experience of leadership and purpose, and that was all kind of birthed from my own pursuit of meaningful work back in 2006. And so as I was leaving the corporate world, leaving my sales job, pursuing this dream, this entrepreneurial direction, trying to do something on my own, I wanted for it to stand for something more. And so I was pursuing meaning for myself and looking for a cause to fight for that was outside of our brand, outside of our services, outside of the day to day. Because when any of those things get hard, when any of those things fail you, and they will, you have to have something bigger that you're fighting for. And so for us and for me, it was really structuring a social mission around our brand and saying, hey, corporate perks are about people. We want to help you save money. We want to stretch your payroll dollars. We want to help these companies we serve deliver great savings opportunities for their people. But at the end of the day, perks are about people, and we want everybody to know they're valuable. They can make a difference in what they do. And so we partnered with World Vision to create an output to our cause through World Vision with every input into the business. And that social mission, that impact plan that we put together early on, became a motivator for our growing team. So in 2006, it was just me and my brother Mark, and we were working together as just the two of us. But as we started building our team started adopting this pursuit of meaningful work. It became meaningful to them, which created this shared purpose within an organization, which aligned our culture, which began to shape a community around our brand of people that were also fighting for our cause. And really what we were most excited to see from all of this momentum was it aligned our culture in a way when we were 100% distributed, 100% remote, over 30 of us working from all different corners of the US. And it aligned us in a way that brought us to get together in a way that we never could. And as a result of that, it grew this community. And one of the neatest parts to come out of that community was it really became a competitive advantage for our brand as well. And that competitive advantage has played a big role in our fast growth.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Brian. I love that you've got 30 people spread out, remote from one another, with this shared purpose that they're driving toward. But when I think about those people kind of spread out, I think there's got to be a lot of details that you've worked through, kind of on you've got the big vision you're driving toward, but let's talk details. How do you communicate with your remote team? How do you make sure they're performing and those types of things? Hey, Brian, I think you're on, let's see.
Did we lose the audio for a second? Okay.
You're
yeah,
back.
there's a very tactical approach that you need to take with running a completely remote team. I mean, you really all need to be aligned without having those kind of shoulder to shoulder moments throughout the workday where you just catch up on so much because of the physical presence that you have together. I like, the culture you develop is independent of your venue. So you just have to think about your venue in a different way. Where we have a remote venue, and really the venue in a remote workplace is each person's individual workspace. And for most of us, that's home, and that's the the corner of our home that we've dedicated for our office space. And the owner of the venue is not the company. And so that's really unique. I'm working in my own home. I'm in my own domain. And so, if I had a boss that was telling me how to do and how to use his resources in my home, well, there's this disconnect there. And so this is where remote work can get hairy right away. And so there are some very simple principles that take a lot of trust and respect for the people that you're working with to put in place. And one of those is managing managing people's output and not their activity. So you're not looking for people to clock in at 9 a.m. and do radio check through your chat messenger or whatever. and you're not looking for them to give you a goodbye at the end of the day, and let you know what you're doing. You're you're letting them manage the function of their role, and you're making sure they get their work done. So you're managing output over activity. The other really important piece of building a healthy remote team, because the venue is in their own home, you're having this really strange interaction with folks where you're kind of, if you were the boss, and this sounds so strange and it's day one, and you're like, okay, in order for you to be successful in our company, you really just need to get one thing right. And if you get this one thing right, everything else is going to fall in your place. I, your boss, need you to make sure that you are prioritizing your personal life over your work life. That means you need to prioritize what you need to get done for yourself to be successful over what I need you to get done for us to be successful together. And this is kind of this counterintuitive way. That means, look, you need to have a pause in the middle of the day to go pick up the kids from the bus stop, and that's okay, right? That might mean you need to make up some work later because we're measuring output instead of activity. But there is this mind shift that's really hard for corporate America to think about. And that is, by prioritizing your personal life over your work life, we're actually setting ourselves up for success, because you have to remember, you are in your own venue, you're in your own domain. You need to be successful in your own environment. That means I need you to prioritize your life well so that we can be successful together. And so there is a lot of discipline that requires, a lot of independence that requires, and that's not something that's for everyone. And it's a really unique way to put things into perspective.
I don't know that that's what we would have expected you to say as the number one priority for managing a remote team, but that is fascinating to see how you've seen that bring success. For everybody who's jumped into the breakout, Brian has graciously shared a couple of resources that we are going to drop into the chat that kind of share a little bit about how he creates a social impact plan and some of the details about communicating well in a remote area. So we appreciate you sharing that, Brian. And I would also say, if you have questions, please drop those in the chat, because we will have time for those to be asked. You can either ask them by coming off mute or share them in the chat throughout so that we get those to those at the end. But I want to shift a little bit and talk to Renji. So Renji, one of the biggest challenges in the remote world is collaboration. I'm an extrovert, and I love walking over to my coworker's desk and having a conversation or scribbling on the whiteboard. And I can't do that in like a Zoom meeting room. But your company, Immersed, imagines a virtual reality office. So tell us, is that the future? Is a virtual reality office the future? Is it already here? What's going on there?
Yeah, so I think one thing that's encouraging is the fact that I don't have to invent this future. What I mean by that is like Apple, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, all these companies are pouring billions of dollars into this next generation of computing, which would be not just VR headsets, but also like Apple glasses, Facebook glasses. There's going to be a lot of announcements coming out in the next, probably the next 12 months or less, about just a lot of this stuff that we're going to be ultimately purchasing without realizing that, like, oh wow, our world's literally about to change. Like back in 2007, if you recall, the iPhone moment when this thing first came out, it blew everyone's minds, and we're about to have something like that yet again, which is obviously really exciting, but that obviously has implications on what this sort of new futuristic world looks like, right? And so I would say that the based on the dollars that the tech giants are spending, I wouldn't say that Zoom culture is going to be the future of remote work. But rather, putting on your pair of Apple glasses, Facebook glasses, whatever, and teleporting into the virtual office. And so we are building the software for that. Immersed, you can go to immersed.com, check it out. Immersed is building the software for that. What it looks like for us to, regardless of which pair of glasses you decide to adopt, we essentially are like the Zoom for the AR VR space, where, regardless of the hardware that you adopt, you essentially hop into an immersed room with your remote team. And yeah, like you mentioned, you can whiteboard together. For coders, you could code side by side with all of your screens in VR. If you're a designer, you can design together in Photoshop, things like that, video editors, etc. And so it's been really cool to see that at this point, we actually have tens of thousands of users who are actually working in virtual reality together every week. Just because this is, especially during COVID, being on Zoom just doesn't replace the in-person presence that we had back in the office. It's 2021, and there just isn't another remote whiteboarding solution that is effective for people. So all that to say, one thing that's been really cool is, our team, for example, we're not large. We're like maybe 23 people. We're hiring a few more, but even at our current size, like only half of us are able to actually be here in Austin. And say for example, God forbid, COVID starts taking off and gets a lot worse. Well, what does it look like for us to actually enter this sort of remote workspace and have something better than what Zoom can offer to essentially get us back to what we had before something like COVID hit? And so the other half of our team is remote around the US. And so we could actually get into our immersed offices together and be together as if we were physically there. We could have this conversation as if we were actually around a white table. And so, a round table. And so, or our whiteboard. So all that to say, it's been really, really cool to see how a lot of people have really started taking that first step into using virtual reality offices. Then again, the form factor as of right now is still like a 1 pound thing on your head, which is like a little bit heavier than an iPhone. But obviously, as Facebook and Apple and Samsung, Panasonic, Lenovo, HP, IBM, all these companies come out with their pair of glasses in the next couple of years, we're going to start really moving forward to a world where essentially, like the glasses that Autumn's wearing on her face right now is going to be the mode in which we actually use our computers, our devices. Instead of having a physical laptop in front of me, I'm going to have a virtual laptop that's rendered through my glasses. I'm going to have a virtual iPad that's floating in the air in front of me. I'm going to be using a virtual keyboard to type. Those are the types of technologies that we're working on now.
I wish that my blue light glasses could do all of those things right now. That sounds
Give it a couple
fantastic.
years.
And I heard you right. Tens of thousands of people are already using this, you said.
Yeah, correct.
So VR it's already here and it's still evolving. So talk to us a little bit. How does a virtual reality space impact work and office culture positively? Are there any negatives? And why do you feel like it's important that as Christian entrepreneurs that we engage in this, virtual reality office space?
Yeah. Well, I'll say that the first negative is we can't eat virtual food together. So that's something that in person provides that VR does not. So until someone invents some kind of VR food thing, I don't even know if that's going to be an option in the future. But there are clear limitations with virtual reality. It's more so for connecting people who couldn't otherwise be together in person. Even for our team, we're going to be doing, once we hit product market fit, we want to do essentially quarterly or at least twice a year, do company retreats where we fly to the same city. But in the meantime, we have a couple of people who will stop in here and there, fly by, every couple of months or whatever, just have a few people from the team come visit the Austin headquarters. But still having that in-person relationship is still important. However, our goal with VR is to have us not have our main medium of communication be Slack or email or whatever, where things can become extremely impersonal. Relationships can become very just not intimate and very, short-tempered, brash, or whatever. We want to make sure that people are building strong relationships. And so the advantage of being in VR is, like, if someone's sitting next to me in VR, it quite literally feels like they're there, and like you don't want to get too close, because just like in real life, people have personal space. So even in VR, you have personal space, right? So that shows you that your mind is really adopting what it's like to be around people, even though they're not physically there. So it's pretty, if you haven't tried it, you should try it, because it's one of those types of things where you just need to kind of see it to believe it and try it to believe it. And we were saying before this call that, like, the first time my mom put on her VR headset, she looked down and couldn't find her legs and started screaming because she thought it was real, right? And so that's one really cool thing about VR, is it really does give you a lot more of that tangible relational side of things, instead of just being on Zoom, or obviously there's a lot of things that Brian and his team have figured out over the years, but oftentimes for a lot of teams that are just going from in person to Zoom for the first time, there are a lot of things that people are trying to play catch up on, and a lot of teams are really struggling in regards to company culture. So I'm trying to remember the second part of your question, Autumn.
Yeah, just if you would reflect,
I
we
remember now.
talked about the positives, if there's
Yeah.
any negatives, and why is it important that
Yeah.
as Christian entrepreneurs, we're engaging this space?
Yeah, I would say as of right now, and this is a mere hardware limitation, the negative as of right now is you can only have this thing on your head for maybe 2 to 4 hours at a time. Whereas if it's glasses, obviously you could have it all day. And the idea is to not just have your work up at all times. It's more so just ergonomics and ease of use and things like that. So, but as far as other negatives, I mean, I think at the end of the day, like we've mainly seen mostly positives. Again, I can't share a meal with my team that's remote, but that's why we're still going to fly together in person. And so the hope is that, we don't move to a world where there's no need for in-person, because I don't think that's the way that God had created humanity or just the way our world works. I think that God does create us to need that in-person relationship, but or even thinking about, trying to have a marriage via text. It's just not going to work. That's not how marriage is designed. And so I think likewise in partnership with people on our team, the fact that we are, 23 founder mentality people, we're all part owners of Immersed. All of us are really incentivized to build relationships with one another, collaborate effectively, and push the business forward. So all that to say, like, I think that one thing has been also like really, really cool as well is, so half of our team are believers, the other half are not. But one thing that's been really cool is it doesn't really matter who is located where. It's been really cool to see how people have been able to build authentic relationships, irrespective of location. I think once some of the people on the team who are not believers, and when they flew in person to be together with our team here in Austin, it's been really cool to see the relationships that almost went to the next level, because they already had a really strong, amicable relationship remotely in VR together. But when it comes to us actually gathering together in person, that did take it to a next level. Whereas there's some people on the team who, before they get their VR headset and they're just still communicating with our team via chat, I mean, they're just not going to have the same level of relationship. Even when we hop on Google Hangouts or on Zoom, it's just not the same thing as if we were actually interacting together in VR or flying together in person. So all that to say, like, I think that it's been really cool to start building relationships proactively using software like this, as opposed to just waiting till someday we meet together in person. And I think that at the end of the day, because this is going to be an inevitable future, and again, the reason why I say that is because just look at the pieces of hardware that's on your desk. It's probably made by Apple or Google or Facebook or Microsoft or whoever. And because these are the tech giants that are really pushing this hardware moving forward, we really want to be able to have a strong influence in that space to make sure that we move forward towards a world that is more productive rather than destructive. And so I wasn't intending for that to rhyme, but that, bars. But as far as
works well.
as far as as far as like also building a world where people will start using it more regularly for things like recreation, like watching movies together in VR with your grandparents who are 500 miles away, who have glasses, right? Or just having virtual happy hours, virtual conferences, things like this, where maybe we do see Tim Keller on the virtual stage and all of us are in the audience and we get to interact with the people near us, but then we see Tim Keller off in the virtual distance. Things like that, right? Being able to do conferences like this where it actually still feels like a conference, even if we can't actually book venues and things like that. Number one, you save a ton of money, but also at the same time, you get to start building a lot of those relationships that you couldn't otherwise. So all that to say, whatever that future or that world looks like in the future, I like the idea of that future being heavily influenced by believers rather than not, because this can very quickly turn into a very kind of dystopian escapism type virtual world where people want to live their own second life. And I kind of talk about this in one of the talks I'm doing for the actual conference, but essentially people are ultimately wanting to be the god of their own reality. If you look back at Second Life or Sims or Grand Theft Auto or whatever, people are living vicariously through this character that they created, as opposed to being who God created them to be. So the fact that with Immerse, we're going to be connecting real people and not really giving people the option to create a fake version of themselves or whatever. At the end of the day, our hope is to ultimately connect people who can not only share the gospel with other people, but help people see the value in what it means to be who God created you to be. So that's kind of the way that our team's thinking about it.
Yeah. Thanks, Renji. I'm glad that you and your team are thinking deeply about this space.
Yeah.
That sounds like it's coming soon. So this question is for both of you. We have about 50 faith-driven entrepreneurs who are with us right now, who've been listening to you guys. And so, they're leading offices. So what should they be thinking about as they lead today's virtual office? And then how should they be planning for tomorrow's? Brian, how about we start with you there?
Yeah, no, that's great. And Renji, I love the way you framed a lot of that. I think often about the relationships are the currency of heaven. And so building relationships and drawing people closer in relationship and closer to their relationship with the Lord, like these are our objectives as Christians as we're pursuing whatever impact we're pursuing out there. And as we're leading teams that are becoming increasingly distributed, especially many of us that many entrepreneurs who had people in the office that 2020 forced out of the office. And now they're really saying, hey, that kind of worked, but how do we get back in the office? I think one thing that's really critical to understand is one of the key ingredients that I've found for a healthy remote team is shared purpose. And for us, all fighting for and against this, the negative effects of extreme poverty in these regions. And listen, one of the coolest things happened a month ago. We got a call from World Vision that said, hey, the village you've been sponsoring over 100 kids in Senegal has actually been lifted out of extreme poverty, and we are leaving. And so I don't know how you guys feel about this because you've got pen pals, but we're releasing all those kids back into their environment. And so we need to get you 100 more kids to replace those because that village is becoming sustainable. And the end of extreme poverty is in sight. 2030 is the United Nations sustainability goal date for that to happen. And a lot of it's on track. So these are really amazing, encouraging things, but shared purpose is what has aligned our remote team in a healthy way. Now, I'm concerned about the entrepreneurs who have seen remote work be successful for them in 2020 and 2021 because they've gotten a false positive for shared purpose, because their team has had a shared purpose in 2020 and 2021. They have not been fighting for something, they've been fighting against something. They've been fighting against this pandemic culture that we're all forced into. And that has created this shared purpose that has rallied people together, that has allowed them to go outside of their comfort zone, that has pushed them to do more than they naturally would, and created some momentum that is not normally there. And so as we are re-entering kind of this post-pandemic marketplace, where you have to know that that bridge of shared purpose that connected your office to your people in this distributed way is receding, and you need to replace that bridge with something else if you're going to keep them in a remote world. This hybrid idea of, well, stay remote if you want, don't for others, or come into the office. I think this is a dangerous idea that generally works based on the kind of role that you're offering that to. Listen, it's normal for your outside salespeople to work remotely. It's been that way for decades. They're roaming all over the place. They're gone all the time. They're making cold calls and knocking on doors, and they're doing things that many other people just don't want to do. And so those people are like, okay, let the outside salespeople have their playground and do what they do, because you can't pay me enough to do what they do. But the moment you tell your accounting team, hey, work from home or come into the office, well, somebody on your accounting team is going to have a situation at home that's just not conducive to a healthy workspace at home. And so they're going to have to come into the office just to do their job. And they're going to resent the people on the accounting team who are maybe not married or don't have young kids or whatever it is that allows them to work from home. And so you're opening the door to some resentment and division within your culture by adopting this kind of hybrid model. So be really intentional over as you're kind of moving into this post-pandemic marketplace. I saw a chat pop up. There are 2 resources on brianrowland.com that might be helpful as you're digging into this more. One is kind of my tactical guide for how to communicate as a remote team. That one's a 1-page PDF called Stop Sending Internal Emails. We haven't been we haven't sent an internal email in over a decade. We don't email as a team. We use the appropriate kind of communication for that. So that means we're either doing a quick chat, we're creating a task for somebody, we're jumping on a phone call, or we're doing a group video. And I don't recommend video for lots of things. I think the phone is a healthier kind of communication medium that uses less energy. That's a whole nother conversation, but I like just jumping on the phone when certain other tasks don't work it out. I also have a one-page impact plan, which is just 5 steps to say, hey, as you are moving into this post-pandemic world, create a social mission for your brand. Take the money that you're saving by no longer leasing that corporate office space and put it towards something that matters, that your team can align around, and work towards your own impact goal, and give your team something they can shape themselves around and fight for, that's outside of your brand and outside of your services. And that can be lots of different things. I know a painting company was like, hey, for every 10 houses we paint, we're going to paint one for free. And listen, defining it is what's most important, because there's a lot of people that are very generous, lots of generous entrepreneurs that they plan to give, but they haven't made a plan for giving. And by not having a plan, they don't have a story to tell. And by not having a story to tell, they're not able to build community and carry the message forward and fight for the cause. And if they're doing something different every single year, or it's a reactive check that's just, I tell my CPA tells me what I can give, but you can't build a story around that that's compelling, which doesn't allow you to further your mission. So get intentional, check out that impact plan. And those would be great places to start that are very tactical for how to lock in what you're going to do within your organization.
Okay, sounds like someone has been listening to Donald Miller talk about story, or maybe you were there before he was. Renji, I'll give you one shot at that question before we have a number of questions from the folks here on the breakout for the both of you.
Cool. Specifically on what does the future of remote work look like, or like what sort of workflows work?
For these entrepreneurs right here, how should they be thinking? How should they be planning? Whether they be a small operation, a big operation, planning for the future.
Yeah. I saw someone on the chat was asking, how much does a VR headset cost? I mean, it's really cool that like Facebook, these cost them about $500 to make, but they're selling it for $300 just because they're trying to get VR out there. And obviously Facebook ads, kind of subsidize the cost, whatever. So, relatively inexpensive compared to what they used to cost, basically be like $1,500 and stuff, but now you get super high quality headsets for $300. So feel free to check it out. When I sort of think about a lot of the struggles that other founders I've talked to and their remote teams have been kind of struggling with, is some of the things that Brian had addressed, such as like, people, I don't know, getting frustrated with each other, and they're like using text as the medium, right? Whether it be email or chat or whatever. Instead, something that a quick phone call could help mitigate. And so I think that there was, a lot of older people than people much older than Brian and I talk about how, the good old days, everything was in person, everyone was able to connect and, kind of wrestle through a lot of these difficulties and frustrations together. To be real, like I think there's a lot that God had hardwired into us around relationships. So meaning when I'm able to interact with a person face to face and have a conversation, whether it be collaborating or going through a conflict that we're trying to resolve, there are things around their facial expressions, their tone, all those things are essential for me to better discern their hearts and have more compassion rather than just like, via text, assuming their tone and then being frustrated back at them and writing another wall of text to email. So all that to say, because not everyone can live in the same city, and because there are companies that really do want access to global talent and can't necessarily relocate people for different reasons, whether it be they have family and extended family in certain cities, or maybe they can't afford to move to another city, or they have certain disabilities. The future that we're trying to build is a future where we can kind of bridge that gap, where once you're able to put on this sort of hardware and you actually are teleported to that other sort of virtual world. And if you haven't seen Ready Player One, definitely go watch Ready Player One, directed by Steven Spielberg. It was an amazing movie. It kind of shows you what the world's going to look like 20-ish years from now. But again, really try to imagine if you're putting something on and you essentially get that in-person type experience, I feel like it's really restoring us back to what things were like before this weird kind of gap between a virtual, like completely virtualized future and kind of only being in person. Kind of this text-based medium has kind of caused a lot of friction in the workplace, at least every job I've been at, and a lot of people I've talked to, founders who are older than me, and have tried to figure out how to, and by the way, like, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. I'm not trying to say that I have anything new here. I'd really try to pull from other founders' learning so I don't have to make as many mistakes myself or learn it the hard way. And so all that being said, as I learned from all these sort of external data points, and I'm pulling a lot of the learnings, kind of the abstract concepts out of that, we're almost building our product to anticipate a lot of that, right? So what does it look like for us to create expressive avatars that get us as close to one-to-one with a person's real expressions, and how that translates to the other person on the other side of things? Because obviously communication is not, you talking at someone. Communication is how it was received on the other end. We are essentially trying to build a product that will help sort of solve those issues, right? And essentially really get us back to what things were like before chat and email became almost a crutch for lack of strong remote collaboration type software. So all that to say, like, number one, I would say embrace this next wave of innovation that's coming out, because I think it's going to fix a lot of the problems that text-based communications have introduced. And at the same time, like, no matter what, technology cannot replace the way that God had wired us. And so what I mean by that is there will always be a need to have to sit down and have a meal with someone. I believe that, like, it's important to have true, authentic in-person relationships with people. And so even if Immerse becomes a 500 office company all around the world in every country or whatever, I still believe there's going to be a need for us to at some point gather together in person. And that's biblical, Hebrews 3:13 and Hebrews 10:24, right? Do not neglect to gather, as is the habit of some. And so all that to say, like, I think that as we are building a future that's trying to help solve the best of both worlds, like even Brian had addressed hybrid office approaches. I think a lot of tech giants use the language, we're trying to give people flexibility. And I agree, I understand what Brian's saying in regards to, it might cause bitterness with some people who have better work situations or flexibility than others. But I think one thing that this next wave of technology is going to enable is something we're working on called co-locating, right? Where if I'm at home and I have my glasses, or I'm in the office and I have my glasses, say there's 5 of us in the office, 5 of us working from home, but all of us putting on these glasses and all 10 of us being around this table as if we're all together in person. These are all the types of problems that we're anticipating and trying to fix. So all that to say, this type of technology that's coming out is being constantly iterated on, constantly trying to solve problems. That's the whole reason why technology exists, because it does solve problems for people and people want to exchange dollars for that service. But all that to say, like, again, like, there's intrinsic internal wirings that God has placed in us that we are essentially trying to bring to the remote world that our world's inevitably going down. And the question is, do we want to embrace that, or are we kind of going to try to boycott it in our home by ourselves, whereas the rest of the world's just going to keep doing what they're doing? So I'm trying to essentially make the best of both worlds, where it's like, let's address and acknowledge the reality of where things are headed, and let's try to make the best of it. So all that to say, I would say embrace the technology, really try your best to also connect back to the way that God had actually wired us. I think that you'll honestly be able to, like, solve any sort of problem. So.
Awesome. I love that you're both talking about how God's wired us for community. And so that is coming through loud and clear, whether it be in a virtual office, in a virtual reality office, bringing that to the forefront as well. All right, so we got just a few minutes. I do want to get to a few questions that have been coming through in the chat. We likely won't get to all of them. I will tell you, I'm biased towards someone who will actually raise their hand, and I'll take them off mute. But so if you want to ask your question, you go ahead and raise your hand. But I'm going to start with a question from Ryan here. And he says, how are Brian and Renji dealing with the loneliness people are feeling in a virtual office? So I'd love to hear each of your thoughts on just loneliness in a virtual office.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a difficult question. So intentionally building a distributed team since 2007, we've really been strategic about the kinds of people we hire, the personalities we hire. And as a result of that, we have buffered a lot of that but that's not really relevant to the people that just had to throw everybody into remote work, which is one reason why I'm not sitting here saying just do it. Remote work is awesome. It's not for everyone, and there are personality types that it really doesn't thrive for. There's specifically 2 people in our company that it's not super healthy for, and one of them is me, because I do require a lot of relationship with people. One reason it does work well for me is because it provides me the autonomy and flexibility that allows me to be creative and grow and motivated to keep going. But it can be lonely because the things I walk away from, and I come home and tell my wife that was awesome. It's like the times I had 30 minutes of coffee with somebody. It's like it's that connection that matters. So really focusing on personality. And if you're a disc profile person, I've got a profile that you can look for that's been successful for us. Of course, you don't want to make this like a formula. You don't want to say no to a great person because of it, but you're looking for somebody that can make their own decisions. So they're like a middle D. They don't need to make too quick of a decision, because unless they're the owner, they might not have all the information. But you need them to be middle, that they're not afraid to make a decision. They need to be able to make a decision. Their I is their interest in people, and their interest in being around people, their interest in connecting. It doesn't mean they don't like people, and it doesn't mean they're not friendly. It just means, are they interested in being around people? And that's kind of the introverted thing. You want that I low. The S is kind of your steady. Do they go with the flow? You kind of want a middle upper, go with the flow. And then the the C is your detail, attentiveness to detail. You want that up as high as possible. And when you have a middle D, a low I, a higher S, and a very high C, you've got people who are very motivated to just get things done, and they want to get things done. They're happy getting things done, and so they don't need a lot of people interaction. That's a very healthy personality profile for a remote team. Now, for the rest of us who aren't that, the closest thing to what Renji's talking about is within, if you use Slack or a Slack channel, just open up a group thing or open up a Zoom and just let everybody be doing their own work during periods of time during the week, and just having like an open camera and an open mic, and so they can hear each other, they can talk to each other, they can interact, and just set aside and pre-schedules some of those kind of open, everybody co-work together remotely sessions. And that gives people something to look forward to. You don't have to do it often. People can mute when they're on different things. That can be a healthy way to bring people together and create that culture. Again, I'll point back to the impact plan, your shared purpose, because that also allows you to be working towards a common goal and pushing through some of the loneliness, because you're focused on something outside of yourself instead of focusing on yourself, and you're fighting for something bigger than yourself. And so those are kind of tactics that I would look to first for fighting loneliness, that are kind of practical and things that you can control. And it's a great relevant question.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. I think we can tell that you've had time to think deeply on that issue. So hopefully that's really helpful to some folks who are looking at hiring, or how to manage folks who, like me, don't match that DISC profile, but are working in a full remote office. I got a puppy so that I have someone to hang out with.
That helps. That helps. Yeah, get a puppy.
So we just have a couple minutes left, and there are a lot of questions about VR, Renji. And so we've got a question about potential security threats. How does it fit in the metaverse? How is it monitored and censored? And so I know, like, in a couple minutes, you don't have time to answer all of those questions, but I want to open it up for you to maybe, is there something regarding security or just any of those that you'd like to address before we wrap up?
Yeah, so I saw a few questions. I can just real quickly try to address a couple of them. So when it comes to security, like, our application is really just an extension of your computer. So all the security software is really what your IT department at your company is going to have that live on your computer. because that's kind of, yeah, again, we're just displaying in VR what's already on your computer. And all the connection stuff between your headset and your computer is all 256-bit encrypted. It's all local, so no one externally can come and connect to it. So that's kind of a really quick and easy solution for us. When it comes to the metaverse question, I mean, as we think about people working, I mean, as of right now, Immersed is the application that people will on average spend the most time in, meaning we have users who are spending 40, 50, 60 hours a week in VR, which is pretty mind-blowing, but that just shows you the power of what we're building here. And so as we naturally extend to virtual happy hours, virtual networking events, virtual conferences, this will become more of like a 3D internet, or sort of like a social, like almost like 3D Facebook, where you can actually go and visit people from your high school in virtual reality. It's kind of like a weird, but again, go watch the movie Ready Player One, directed by Steven Spielberg. Great movie. It'll really kind of explain what that looks like. And then someone here had asked about like what sort of principles do we intentionally call upon when building teams, remote or not. Well, actually, before I answer that, something that Brian touched on I thought was really cool. The VR side of things. During COVID, a lot of people, especially freelancers who kind of work on their own projects, were getting really lonely. And so they were actually using our application just to work in virtual cafes side by side with random people they never met. They're not collaborating or anything. They're just there. So similar to how Brian was saying, people on your team can open up a Zoom session or a voice chat or whatever and just sit there and do their own work. People were doing that and still are doing that in our virtual cafes as well. They don't have to collaborate. They're just there around. It's quite literally a virtual coffee shop, which is really cool. Yeah, I mean, I guess I could take a stab at that last question real quick too, if you have a minute. When it comes to building teams, I mean, I'm very forward, open, and honest about my faith, and so it's right there on my LinkedIn profile. And so even when it comes to people who want to end up joining our team, it should be a person who is okay with the fact that like I am who I am, and like they should be cool with who they are as well. And so if they are hostile towards Christianity, then they probably shouldn't work at Immersed. Everyone who, like I said, less than half of our team are believers, but the other half, the majority of people are not believers. And so, but they love the people on our team regardless of faith background. So that's not something that we hide at Immerse. We are just very open and honest about it. And people are very open and receptive to it. So it's been really, really cool to see how people from all sorts of backgrounds are totally comfortable working here. And we just love on them. Simple as that. And all that to say, like there's still biblical principles around bad company corrupts good morals. And so it's important for us to make sure that the type of person that we're trying to hire is a person who does fit your company's culture values, right? So for us, we have values around elevating others, being swift and precise with the way that you want to execute and get things done. We really care that people are really engaging, have a founder mentality, all that to say, if a person is not teachable, if they're not all these things, then regardless of how much skill they have, they just can't work at Immerse, because we really care about the relationships here. So that's how we do hiring.
Awesome. Thanks, Renji. Well, thank you to both Brian and to Renji. BrianRowland.com. I know we dropped some of his resources in the chat, but check that out if you appreciated his insights. And Renji, I see you've put there Immerse.com if you want to know more about virtual reality. So hopefully this has been helpful for you as you are managing or thinking about managing remote workplaces, and just want to make sure you get a little time here before we jump back in to the conference live stream at 2:40, where you will actually see more from Brian and from Renji, as well as a few other folks. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the conference.